Living on hypocrisy is not a healthy diet for patriots. Tom Tancredo, former U.S. House of Representatives member, Colorado. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. For tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so ever early. All right. So we're back at it again. Wednesday, I spoke out against the canceling of a very specific person, the Home Depot lady. Her name is Darcy. I don't remember her last name. Um, and I was pretty emphatic that she should not have been canceled. And this was me talking about a very specific incident. Okay. And I even took issue with the man that recorded her, who claimed that he was a veteran. And I was very opposed to him using his veteran status to help get her canceled because she said something that he thinks she shouldn't have said. And I actually agree with him that she should not have said it. Now, today, I'm not going to talk about the specific necessarily. What I want to do is, because the internet's still talking about it, what I want to do is I want to talk more broadly about this issue of cancel culture, because many believe that a harsh response is necessary to quote unquote win. Now, the first thing that you have to do is you have to get your facts correct. And in my debating and just kind of reviewing various, you're just kind of scrolling through like social media and whatnot, I'm finding that a lot of people have their facts wrong. Now, not entirely, but enough. Because a lot of people are like, well, the Home Depot lady, she deserved to get fired because she was making fun of, the innocent citizen who was killed. There was a man who was a firefighter, and he was killed by one of those bullets. Okay, so President Trump was shot in the ear. Another man, firefighter, I think he was a dad, and a husband, he was killed. He was killed protecting his family, and it's sickening. Like, none of that should have ever happened. So a lot of people are like, well, they're conflating Darcy, the Home Depot lady, with who we might call Fat Linda. Now, when I say Fat Linda, I'm not necessarily trying to make fun of her per se. I picked that up from somebody else and it just kind of stuck. And to be perfectly honest with you, I figured I'm not trying to cancel you, but if the worst that I do is I call you Fat Linda, I'm comfortable with that. But let me show you some images here. So this is Darcy, okay? This is the Home Depot lady. And so let's be very clear what she said. She said, "Too bad they weren't a better shooter." That was her comment. So she was basically saying, "Hey, the president should have been shot and killed." That's basically what she said. Now, one of the things that people make a mistake on is they say, "Well, she called for the president to be killed." Legally, that would fail in court because she did not. She lamented that the president was not shot or not shot and killed. Now, here's the thing. Legally, that's a major distinction. Socially, it's more of a distinction without difference. So I get that. But again, we're going to have these conversations. We're going to argue. We're going to try to punish people. We should probably be very clear on what the facts are so that at least if we're doling out punishment, whether we're getting them fired from their job, maybe we're bringing them before the government so the government can punish them, or we're just punishing them socially. We should at least be accurate. I mean, think about it for a moment. If you're going to get in trouble for something, whether it's legally or socially, wouldn't you at least want to be in trouble for what you actually did, not what people thought you did? Because, folks, what goes around comes around. So we want to make sure that we're correct. So that's what Darcy, the Home Depot lady, said. So let's take a look at Fat Linda's comment. So this is Linda Peterson, aka Fat Linda. She goes into it a little bit more. She said, "Damn it, he didn't die. Well, at least one supporter did. I'll take what I can get. My heart goes out to the family of the shooter. Know that he died doing what needed to be done. Hopefully, someone will accomplish the task before we vote." Now, that's pretty vile. This is way worse than what Home Depot lady said, because this woman took it like in my opinion, it is one thing to use violent rhetoric when it comes to our politicians. It's another thing for your fellow citizens. It's an entirely different thing, right? Like in the country has a long history of violent rhetoric toward our politicians. I mean, if you go all the way back, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, like his wife died and he blamed it on the political rhetoric, of the day, calling her a bigamist, right? Like these, like this, we have a rich history of very harsh and violent rhetoric toward our politicians. And in fact, the people that are upset now, well, some of them have kind of been on the guilty side as well, as we'll see in just a moment. So, this is what Linda said. And a lot of people are conflating Fat Linda with Home Depot lady. Now, the interesting thing is, Fat Linda doesn't work at Home Depot. It appears, it appears that she owns a yoga studio. Okay. Now, why am I showing you this? Like, it's important to make sure that we're doling out the right punishment to the right person for whatever they actually did. And so while people are celebrating that Home Depot lady got fired because she was celebrating that a citizen died, that's actually not true. So you might, in this particular case, between these two people, you might say, well, look, Fat Linda deserves to be punished more than Home Depot lady. You know, like you might say, like, well, I'll give you talking trash about our president and our politicians, which a lot of people do, right? Like, how many times, at least in the liberty community, have you seen helicopter rides and Gitmo for presidents? And what's the other one? Tar and feather, memes and jokes, right? Like, these are violent things. Violence is violence. And in my opinion, if you want to talk about this difference without distinction, suggesting that somebody should have died and then just suggesting violent actions happen to them, tar and feather, whatever, guillotines, those kind of that's all the same. It's all violent. Now, let me tell you, when it comes to rhetoric like that, you're not going to get too much more free speech than me. Like, I just personally don't care. I might criticize you. If I see something you post online and I don't like it, I'll criticize it. I'll say, "Hey, you should have said that." But beyond me chiming in with my own speech, I largely don't care so long as what you're saying is not an actual threat. If you say, "I wish the president were dead," I'm okay with that, right? Legally okay with that. I'm okay with you being permitted to say it. I'm okay with you not losing your job for that. I may not be okay that I won't say anything, but I'm okay with it in that context. But if you say, "I'm going to kill the president," well, that becomes a different story. Now, maybe we need to have you investigated. Okay. Because you're making a threat and people should not have to live under threat, period. But so when it comes to speech, I'm wide open on this. But The right, who is now complaining, well, let's take a look at this. And there are a ton of examples, but I think this is the absolute most relevant example of hypocrisy in on the right. The best one that I can think of and find. Here it is. Donald Trump Jr., his son, Donald Trump. Now remember, Donald Trump got shot, and a while back, Donald Trump Jr. was mad at some young guy who's basically a Democrat shill, when he was talking about what the Supreme Court ruling said and suggested that SEAL Team 6 could take out Donald Trump if he wanted. And Donald Trump Jr. threw a big fit, got on social media and was like, I can't believe this. He called for the death of my father. Well, actually, he didn't really. He was citing from the Supreme Court ruling and kind of making a snarky comment about the ruling and what would be permitted. And he was wrong anyway. But that's, when I covered that in my when I talked about the Supreme Court ruling. But here, this was shortly after an intruder broke into Nancy Pelosi's home. Nancy Pelosi, screamed that there was an attacker. Paul Pelosi, her husband, went to protect her, and the man hit him with a hammer, and he ended up going to the hospital, and he had some injuries on his head. And so this is, and I think the gist of this particular meme is that Paul Pelosi was in his underwear, I believe. So he's in his underwear and the intruder happened to attack him, or maybe the intruder was in his underwear. I'm not really sure. I don't remember exactly, but one of those two was in their underwear and had a hammer, and the intruder had a hammer and attacked Paul Pelosi. Now, look, just like the bullet that grazed Donald Trump's face that hit his ear, and had he had his head been turned in a different direction, the outcome could have been vastly and horribly different. The same way that could have happened in the Paul Pelosi attack. Paul Pelosi could have been killed by a hammer. A hammer can kill somebody, and it isn't hard. Yet, Donald Trump Jr. had no problem posting this joke and saying, got my Paul Pelosi Halloween costume ready. He thought it was funny. Now, should he be punished? Should he be canceled? I don't think so, any more than anybody else. I wouldn't. I don't have time for that. Should he be criticized if we want to talk about it on social media? Sure. I'm good with that. Absolutely. But I just want to point out that the right, who is now making a big stink of this because it was the president, didn't seem to have a problem when it was their political opponent because they're hypocrites. Now, me, again, I don't care. I'm just talking about things, but I'm not trying to cancel anybody because that's not what I do. That's not my thing. So then we have this question now, like, what do we do about it? Well, I think, again, the first thing is make sure we have our facts correct, because there might be somebody that, hey, cancel person A, but person B, let them go. That was no big deal. Right. And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what we decide. But you can't make those decisions unless you have your facts correct in the first place. Second of all, I'm going to say, don't be a hypocrite. Apply to your side what you were applying to the other side. Hold yourself to the same standards that you're holding your opponents. The next thing I would argue is we need to change our language just slightly. There were a lot of comments when people were defending this idea of the Home Depot lady getting canceled. And the reason that Home Depot lady comes up all the time is because Home Depot, if you don't know, if you were living under a rock, Home Depot lady, not only was she put on blast on social media, but then Home Depot themselves, the company, responded to libs of TikTok and said, that's not part of our values. She no longer works with us. Now, they weren't clear on whether or not the woman maybe quit or they fired her. It's not exactly clear. Everybody assumes, myself included, that she was fired. Okay. But when people refer to Home Depot lady, they often say something like, well, she would have done the same thing had it been the other way. Or they would say, I know her type, or they are all the same. And what they do, and I really hate using these terms, but I'm going to use it because I think it's valuable at this particular moment, is they collectivize people rather than holding people accountable for their own actions. People are being collectivized. We take Home Depot lady and we say, well, they are all the same. And there's a lot of assumptions about who these women are. The biggest assumption is what they said. And as I showed you, they said entirely different things. One woman just left her comment at the president. The other woman made it about the president, went actually even further and said, hopefully somebody will finish the job. And she included an innocent civilian who had nothing to do with anything other than simply being present at the time. So there were entirely different comments. So that was the first mistake in not, you don't like, because a lot of people are like, well, I've seen comments, well, I know her type. No, you don't. You don't know her type. Or people would say, well, if the shoe were on the other foot, she would be doing the same thing. Maybe, and maybe not. But here's the problem. That leads you to the exact same place where the left, if you will, is. And so the question is, did you hate that behavior or not? If you hated that behavior, why are you now justifying engaging in it? Did you stop hating that behavior? Did you finally just come to the conclusion and say, you know what? I was wrong. I should have never hated it. They were right in doing it all along. And now I'm right in doing it. That's not how people are coming across. Instead, what they're coming across is, well, we have to do this because they did it to us. And it's funny because most of the people saying that have never been canceled. So this whole they versus us, it's really more like that group of people did something to these people, so therefore I need to support and join in on this. So all you're doing is involving yourself in something that really had nothing to do with you. And some people now there are some people who have been, who have had to deal with the culture warrior fight. They people have tried to cancel them. There are some of those out there. But for the vast majority of people, that argument doesn't stand up because nobody was trying to get you fired from work. And even if they were, the real question is, was it Fat Linda? Was it Home Depot lady? Because again, these are the assumptions that people justify it by saying, well, she was joining in on this. But do you know that? And the answer is no, you don't know that. Because beyond these comments, virtually everybody that's justifying this has no idea about these two women. And I know this because nobody's saying anything. Nobody's pointing to any other comments where these women said, haha, I'm glad this random person got fired. Nobody's pointing to those kind of comments. And a lot of people can't even get it straight on what they actually said. So, no, you don't know these women. You don't know if this was the only time that they got on social media to engage in the culture war, so to speak. But more importantly, the question of I equate the culture war with actual war in a sense. So let me pull this. Let me pull this up on his Twitter comment that I made, and I think it's very instructive. And you will, if you think about it, I think you will find that it's the correct position. So let's take a look at this. All right. So here's my comment. And I'm responding to this person who says the culture war has not yet hasn't peaked. And so he had posted a meme, and apologies, I'm trying to get it all up on the screen there. And this meme is basically making fun of the other side of people. So it says, "Whoa, you want people to lose their jobs for calling for assassination and wishing death upon you? That's pretty hypocritical when you didn't like getting fired for using the wrong pronouns, thinking men can't be women, making an okay hand sign, and wearing a MAGA hat in your Facebook photo. Those are no different. What are you, a hypocrite? And so it's basically like this meme is making fun of the idea that people would equate calling for the assassination or lamenting that an assassination failed of the president, equating that with getting people fired for using the wrong pronoun or saying that, men can't be women, or that men aren't women, men aren't women, like a woman is a biological female. So it's making fun of this idea. That's what the meme does. So here's what I said: when bombing terrorists, killing civilians in the process predictably creates new terrorists out of friends and family. Similar motivation creates culture warriors. We call it culture war math. The culture war has not peaked, and the right won't like where it goes. Now, I'm not going to that last line. I'm not really going to expand on that because I think it would take a lot longer. But suffice it to say, I will just say that I think that the right is playing a game for which they are not prepared to go the distance. Right? That's the summary of my belief on that particular line. But let's go back to this culture war math, this idea. I think there was an idea called terrorist math. The idea is that when you bomb, like, let's say that the US sends a bomb and we're going to try to kill an actual terrorist who has actually done terrorist things. Okay. Not just somebody that is in the group, but somebody who is that we know has actually perpetrated terrorism by their own hand in some way. And so we go to kill them. And let's say that we kill them while they're at a wedding. We kill all the participants there as well. The terrorist math says you've just increased terrorism because all of those people who may not have been terrorists, they have family and friends who now want vengeance. And those family and friends, especially if they're younger, they often grow up to be terrorists. So you basically, to kill one terrorist, if you in the way that you might do it by killing innocent people, you create more terrorists. And so I make the same, or I make a sim. I think there's a similar argument to be made in the culture war. Now, I'm not suggesting that Fat Linda or that Home Depot lady are innocent. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I am suggesting is that, number one, we don't know who they are. We don't know the full extent of their participation, if you will. Their participation may have started and ended with this simple comment, or just kind of running their mouth on social media. That could have been the start and end of it. And by getting them canceled, you may now have said, hey, guess what? You need to actually join forces and now participate. So you might have actually grown the numbers by one. And if there are any family members that are dependent on them for the income that they would now lose, then those people might now be culture warriors for the left. And if there's anybody that's sympathetic to them, let's say Home Depot lady has a neighbor, and Home Depot lady's neighbor sympathizes with her and says, I know that Darcy is generally a good person. She just made a stupid comment that she shouldn't have on social media. Well, now you may have made a culture warrior out of her neighbor or her friend, right? Who now is bitter because they're watching somebody that they like suffer. You call it culture war math. This is what happens. You might say, well, DL, can you really prove this theory? I think so. By virtue of what the right has already told me. This has been happening to us for 10 years. Okay. You specifically? Well, no, but I watched these people. Okay. So now you're getting involved in the culture war that never actually affected you personally. Well, oh yeah, but we got to, because we got to go against the left. Okay, well, great. Guess what? That's culture war math. You just proved my point. You weren't the one that was attacked, but you signed up anyway. You signed up in the fight. So what do you think is going to happen for those on the left when you start taking out their nobodies? And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I'm just saying, like, Home Depot lady, she was a nobody in terms of this huge political fight. Just a regular, everyday, average person going to work, hoping she doesn't get yelled at too much by some angry customer at Home Depot. That's that's what we can be sure of Darcy, is that she is a nobody or was a nobody, and she still is a nobody, right? Like, and again, I'm not saying this to denigrate her. I'm saying this in the context that she has no power, she has no influence. It's unlikely that her firing affected anybody else other than maybe people that are sympathetic to her. So this ultimately, the right engaging in the way that they are is kind of proving my point. And I say this is going to happen in reverse in due time. This is why I don't think that the right is going to like where it goes, because I think a lot of people believe, hey, if we just fire enough of their foot soldiers or alleged foot soldiers, then the people at the top will get the message. And I'm like, no, that's not really how it's going to work, because that's not how it worked for you. How it's going to work is you're going to embolden others, and they're going to now join that fight for whatever reason. Maybe they'll just say, hey, the right is now hitting us really, really hard. We better get in there and fight. I didn't want to fight, but man, they're coming after my people, and they're coming after them hard now, and they're getting lowly people fired. They're not even taking out our generals. They're going after all the soldiers. So I think that this is just a recipe for continued fighting. And it's going to be basically the culture war is the Middle East. That's what it is right now as people are fighting it, because everybody is just basically doing the same thing. And then I would further argue, if you're on the right and you're like, I'm going to start canceling people, and then effectively you've been co-opted by the left. Like, if you believe that the left started this, right? And that's how a lot of people are phrasing it. They're like, hey, they started it. Okay. Thanks a lot, 7-year-old. But, like, okay, fine. If you believe they started it and that's what they enjoy doing, then they've got you doing their same work. It may be to their own people, but they've got you working for them. You are now a worker for the leftist, if you believe that, because they wanted a culture war, they got it. They got you doing what they like. You didn't surprise them and say, nope, I'm going to come at it from a different angle. No, you did exactly what they would have expected. So then we might come to the question of, okay, well, how do we handle this? Like, what is the right answer, DL? Is it to turn the other cheek? I get this one a lot. This is a very interesting one. Like, a lot of people are like, dude, turning the other cheek doesn't work. And I'm like, well, I've never said turn the other cheek. What I have said is to go after people with power, not the Home Depot cashier, right? Not some lowly nobody. Go after somebody with power. And there was a very interesting thread that somebody made, and they pointed out all these people that had been canceled in years past. And it was very interesting. So in this thread, I'm just going to read you some of the names. So they were like a short list of how, quote, turn the other cheek absolutely didn't moderate the left. Just a few examples off the top of my head. So they go back to 2014. You might remember Dr. Matt Taylor. That was the guy that he was that really popular scientist when they put a craft, like, was it on the moon? I'm not on the moon. Was it on a comet? I can't remember exactly now. But he did something really, really cool when it comes to sending stuff into outer space. And he wore a shirt that had all these like sexy, big, busty women on it. And people flipped out, right? And he ended up coming back and apologizing to everybody. And so this is one of the examples. They're like, remember this guy? And then they go on and they're like, remember the kid that was in Washington, D.C., who was wearing a MAGA hat, the 17-year-old boy? And then and then Reza Aslan posted a picture of him kind of grinning. And he said, honest question, have you seen a more punchable face than this kid's? Right. And so people were pointing out, they're like, that was in 2019. Right. And then they go on and they talk about Gina Carano, how she got fired for posting a meme. She got fired from Disney and Lucasfilms. And they go on and on and on. There's like, I don't know, 20 or 25 different examples. And they go on and on and on. And here's the thing. Yes, all of those people in some way got canceled or the mob went after them in a way, but nobody's holding the specific people accountable for that. Nor, and this is the important part, nor are they holding the agitators. So let me tell you a couple of quick like anecdotes or stories, or I don't know what you want to call them. When I was in the military, I went to Bosnia. We did a lot of training. So when I went to Bosnia in 2002, we went there with S4, and we were working with. It was an international effort. This was after the Bosnia War, and we were there as peacekeepers. So our job was basically to go around patrolling. So for 6 months prior to deployment, here in the US, we were at different bases doing different training. And one of the training was dealing with crowd control. And they were like, what happens if a crowd of people form together and then start getting hostile or violent? What do you do? One of the things that they taught us, they said, one of the best ways to control a crowd, not always, I mean, it depends on the size of the crowd and what's going on, but one of the best ways is if you can find the agitator and you extract the agitator out. So they actually trained us to identify the agitator in a crowd, snatch them out, and get them away from the crowd. Because what ends up happening is there's usually one person who's kind of like leading the charge or kind of getting people amped up, kind of doing the whole pep rally thing, getting people just fired up to do whatever it is. Maybe they're just going to stand there and yell, and you've got one person that's like, what do we want? This. When do we want it? Now, right? And you have that one person who is getting the crowd just going. And if you remove that person, then the crowd has no leader. So then what do? Well, they're easier to control. Now, it's not always a guarantee. I mean, it depends. I mean, there are situations where the crowd comes in and they're just crazy and there doesn't appear to be any leader. That's an entirely different story. Then I want to tell you another story. This is a fun one. This is a story my dad told me when I was younger. He grew up in Detroit. And one day, him and his friends were, walking along doing their thing. And a group of guys came up. And I don't know if they were a formal gang or just a gang, as in like a loose group of people. But a gang showed up and they were threatening him. And what my dad did was he picked out the biggest dude there and said, well, I'll fight you. And he beat him up. And then everybody left. What did he do? He basically grabbed their strongest guy, the guy that everybody was looking up to, and and beat him up. And then everybody else was like, well, I know that dude could beat me up, and this man just beat up this guy. Maybe I don't want to fight him now. Right. And so my answer is not to turn the other cheek, but it's to go after the people with power. The Home Depot lady, she's not stirring anybody up. She is not relevant to anybody. I mean, she stirred people up with her comment, but she's not instigating people. She's not causing anybody to lose their jobs. She's not firing up a crowd of people so that they can go after other groups. She is literally nobody. They libs of TikTok took out the weakest possible person they could find. And then everybody's cheering. Everybody's like, "Hey, it's like, let's go pick on the person who's crippled and can't even get up, can't do anything. They can't wage the war. Let's beat them up, and then guess what? Whoa. But no, you accomplished nothing because you didn't go after anybody that actually has real power. Go after those people. If you're concerned about the the scientist who got, dragged for wearing a shirt, then go after the people who made the biggest stink. Go after them. I don't think you should turn the other cheek necessarily. But I don't think it's wise to just go after anyone and everyone, because what that really means is going after low-hanging fruit and then pretending like you've won or you've accomplished something. Do you know how many Home Depots? There are 11 Home Depots in Jacksonville. How many of those Home Depots in Jacksonville do you suppose have somebody like Darcy on either side, left or right? How many? There's probably quite a few that hold these opinions. And so what? Now all those people are afraid to speak? Well, that's not good. Now we don't know who they are. We don't know what they're thinking. And I thought the antidote to bad speech was more speech, not less. So either the right believes that or they don't. So if you want to take somebody out, take out people with power. Go after them, not the lowly nobodies. The other thing that you might want to do is leave a little room for grace, which this one's tough. Leave some room for grace for people who might change. Because again, like I said, you don't know Darcy. You have no, you, I mean, other than her one single Facebook post, nobody that I have seen knows anything about her. They don't know if she's just frustrated and having a bad day and decided to punch out a very nasty comment, but otherwise, as a person that would be willing to listen. They don't know if she's a deranged leftist who just wants all right wingers dead. They don't know, or somewhere in between. They don't know it. They don't know who she is. But I will tell you this, even if she's a crazed lunatic, that doesn't mean she can't be turned around. So then the question is, well, how do you turn those people around? You leave the door open for grace. Because when you get people fired indiscriminately, there is no grace there and there is no change. You are forcing people to take a side, the other side. You're forcing it on them because you're not leaving any opportunity for them to say, okay, look, you know what? I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. Um, and I can totally do better and maybe even switch over to your own side. Now, again, not suggesting that everybody can be changed. Some of them won't. There will be some for which today they want you fired, tomorrow they want you fired, and then 5 years from now they want you fired, and there is nothing you can do to change that. But you don't know who they are. I want to show you a couple of clips that I think kind of really hit home. Before I do that, I want to point out I've used these clips in the opposite direction. Today, I'm criticizing the right for, and if we're splitting people into groups, I'm criticizing those who are more right leaning now going after those who are left leaning. Well, in the past, I've used these same ones in the exact opposite direction. I've pointed out to the left, to those more left leaning, hey, this is why you should be more open to people to sit down and have a conversation with them. One of the clips that I don't have, and I didn't pull it, it's the video clip oh, drawing a blank on his name. He's the black man that goes and sits down with the KKK members. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Daryl Davis. If you watch Daryl Davis's video from his TED Talk, he tells you that he's like, look, I'm just a jazz musician. All I wanted to do was know why these people hated me. That's it. He wasn't trying to change them. He wasn't trying to challenge them. He just wanted to know, why do you hate me? And so he put in the effort to go and sit down and have a conversation with them. And over the years, he boasts that about 200 people have left the Klan or the white supremacist movement because of interaction with him. He didn't go to get them fired. He didn't try to cancel them. He didn't fight them. He didn't mess up who they were. In fact, he went and he said, I don't know who you are or what you're about. Can we have a conversation? And then through that, those people learned, you know what? This black guy isn't so bad after all. In fact, black guys, black people aren't so bad after all. And it started with one man who simply said, why do you hate me? That's it. He didn't try to fight in a culture war. He just said, I want to know what's up. Let me sit down and have a conversation with you. And then he ends that talk by saying, you know, if I can do it, you can do it. And it's funny because I used to tell this to people. They would say, oh, that person's a bigot. That person's a racist. That person's this. And I'm like, okay, all those words are nice sounding, I guess. But have you had a conversation with them? Oh, I'm not having a conversation with that person. Why? They're a terrible, evil person. Why would I give them any of my time? Well, because that's how you change people. That's how people become different, is through interaction. And there's actually science behind it, by the way. In fact, let me just throw a little nugget out at you. There's more science to support that than there is to support the efficacy of the COVID vaccines. And I used to use that point against people that were more on the left who would, talk about bigotry, but also were really, really big about the COVID vaccine. I would tell this. I would be like, by the way, since you're so worried about all this evidence that seemingly supports your position, there's more evidence to support that what you're doing doesn't work and that what I'm telling you would work, does work. There's more evidence to support that than there is for the COVID vaccine. There was like some 500 some studies have proven it. You can look it up. It's called, as soon as I remember, I didn't write down the word in my notes because I wasn't planning on mentioning that. Contact theory. It's called contact theory. So go look it up. Go research contact theory. You will be amazed. Gordon Allport. That's the name of the man you're going to want to look for. But anyway, back to these clips. So I want to show you two clips. So I just told you about Daryl Davis and his TED Talk. But now I want to show you a real world example from somebody else. So let me show you this first clip. This first clip actually is a man from here in Jacksonville several years ago. Actually, it's more than several, it's about like 2017. So let me show you this video of this news clip. And it's a couple minutes long. It's like 3 minutes long. I might cut it short. And then I'm going to show you a follow-up clip to that. So here it is.
Person really change who he is? That's the question at the heart of this story coming up. A former Grand Dragon of the KKK who was actually suspended from UNF after posting a threatening photo on social media says he has had a change of heart.
That's right. His name is Ken Parker, and he attends a different local institution now where he soon hopes to graduate. Now, in the meantime, he wants the First Coast to know one thing. He says now that he is sorry, and he spoke exclusively today with Shelby Danielson.
It's here where Ken Parker says he's closing one chapter of his life and he's opening another. And this one is a complete 180.
Oh, well, we're going to shut down racists. We're going to shut down bigots. And I'm like, all right, well, come at me on campus.
This was Ken Parker last November, hostile racist, a self-proclaimed neo-Nazi white nationalist.
That's how Jesus lived his life. And Matthew 22, Jesus said unto him, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment.
This is Ken Parker today.
I've been basically single-handedly spreading hate and discontent, throwing flyers out, showing up to demonstrations.
This former KKK member says he's happy now, and he's okay if the public is skeptical, especially since he used to use the Bible to justify his hatred.
My relationship is between me and God, so they can believe it or not believe it. It's up to them. All I can do is try and live my life in a Christian manner.
Okay, so I want to pause it here real quick because I want to go to the image that you saw. It was very quick. I want to post this up here so that you can see exactly where this man once was. So here's this picture. This is what got him removed from UNF. He posted this picture holding a rifle with a swastika on his chest. This is one of those like dopey selfies. This caused all the controversy. This is what got him the spotlight and got all the news. And when we say this man was a racist, when we say this man was a white supremacist, we're not talking just including anybody who's a white supremacist that disagrees. We're talking about somebody who said, I don't like blacks and gays and Jews and whoever else. Like, he's self-avowed. He is the real deal. This is, no ambiguity, no people misinterpreting his word. Nope. Total, outright, 100% was a KKK, or I think he was the Grand Dragon of the KKK. So let's continue watching that video clip and see what else he has to say.
Recently resigned from the National Socialist Movement. He wants UNF and all of Jacksonville to know he's sorry.
They treat everybody there with love.
He's referring to this Southside church, the place where that old chapter in his life ended. So how did he make such a drastic change?
A female Muslim reporter from the UK, she filmed a documentary with me. It was the first time in my life I'd ever really interacted with a Muslim.
That was step one for Parker. Step two was this man, a pastor. He says never gave up on him or his fiance.
I was hanging out down by the pool, and there's a black pastor. He invited us to go to church with him, so he showed us nothing but love.
Step three was being welcomed into these doors with open arms. Do you feel any of that anger you felt the last time?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's just not fun. Some people might have fun. You might convince yourself it's fun for a little while, but it just takes too much time and energy to live like that.
Members of this congregation tell me they've seen Ken Parker here every Sunday since a couple weeks before Easter. They said on Easter Sunday, he sat in the front row. They said he's been just as involved as anyone else, singing along and appearing to be very happy that he's here. Reporting on the South Side, Shelby Danielson, First Coast News, on your side.
Shelby, thanks.
All right. So that's Ken Parker. And I'm going to show you a video of the Muslim reporter. Now, I want to tell you, the Muslim reporter, what she did was she had a documentary that she was filming. I think it was called White Right, something like that. I can't remember the name of it. Should have been more prepared for that. But anyway, she did a documentary on on white nationalist, and she went down to Charlottesville. She also came down to Jacksonville, and she interviewed Ken Parker. And what's interesting is if you watch her documentary, you can see the interaction where she's talking to him. And there's at one point, and I think it was in the documentary where he expresses, he said, you're the only Muslim that I've ever met, and you've been so nice to me. And it blew his mind. He was expecting her to be hostile and mean because that's what he was. And she turned out not to meet his expectations. And that made him reevaluate everything he knew or thought he knew. Furthermore, he points out, and I think it's also in the documentary, that when his fiance got sick and was in the hospital, of all the people that he knew, the only one to call and ask how his fiance was doing was Dia Khan. She followed up and said, hey, or it was either her or a woman from the local mosque. I don't remember which one exactly. But a Muslim that he hated, that knew he hated them for simply being brown, they called him up and they said, hey, man, how's your girlfriend doing? The black pastor, and I don't know if the black pastor knew who Ken Parker was. I assume he did, because Ken Parker made national headlines for that photo. So I assume the man knew him. He said, hey, man, why don't you come to our barbecue? And I think there's another interview with Ken where he's like, he's telling his story and he's like, I give my testimony in church and I tell them that this group wasn't racist enough. So I quit them and I went to another one. He said their jaws hit the floor. Like, this man was like seriously hateful. And yet, two people, the people that he hated just for the way they looked, caused him to rethink everything by simply being nice to him. But there's more to that. I want you to hear what Dia Khan said on Russell Brand, she was interviewed by Russell Brand, and the episode title is Love Will Win. And there's this clip where she's talking. He asked her about her interaction with Ken. And I think what she said was extremely enlightening. So let's take a listen. Maybe.
Yeah, I would
What
love
did
to
you
do
think of
that.
him by
Yeah, I
how
would
what
love
did
to
you
do
think of him
that.
by this stage? Did you like him?
I liked him.
Did it so
That
did it,
sounds really counterintuitive, right? Right, for a person like me to sit there and somebody who considers me to be a shit skin and a degenerate and all
did he
kinds
say
of
stuff like that during the conversation?
no, because he wasn't able to. So what I did do is that I told him all those things. I described myself in those terms because that's how I'd been described by people in the past and also in the threats that I'd received. So I kept using these words about myself just to his face. We sat this far apart from each other. And every time I would use a word like that about myself, he would just squirm and be really uncomfortable. And then I just started laughing and going, look, I mean, obviously this isn't the first time that you're hearing words like this. I'm assuming you use words like this. And if you don't, then people around you certainly do. So why are you so uncomfortable? And he just couldn't answer, but he was really uncomfortable. And I said, do you not want me to use language like that? And he's like, no, I don't. And so, so part of that question that I had, is it possible to hate in up close and personal? And face to face, obviously it wasn't possible for him. It is possible for many other people, but it wasn't possible for him.
What does that make you think?
That something else is possible. That also my judgments against people like him, my prejudices, and my kind of very flat caricature that I carry in my mind and my heart about men like that is also incorrect. So it's
I want you to hear that one more time. I'm going to roll it back just a few moments because I think this is very enlightening and we all need to hear this a second time.
also my judgments against people like him, my prejudices, and my kind of very flat caricature that I carry in my mind and my heart about men like that is also incorrect. So it says something about me as well.
All right. It says something about you because ultimately, when we paint with a broad brush, it doesn't matter whether we're the good guys or the bad guys. It doesn't matter if I'm a racist or responding to the racist. When you paint somebody with a broad brush, you are creating a very flat caricature of who they are. And you don't know to the extent of who they are. In other words, people don't know, because she said in there, she said, I wanted to know, is it possible for people to hate up front and personal, in person? And it's the same thing that that Daryl Davis did. Daryl Davis was like, I mean, he did it for a different reason. He's like, I want to know why you hate me. And she said, I want to know, can you hate me if I'm face to face with you, talking with you? And she pointed out, she said, it is possible for some people. Some people would, unlike Ken Parker, would have had no problem saying, you're a shit-skinned degenerate. That's what she said. They would have no problem with that. And they will believe it 100%. And you may not be able to persuade them. And then there are people like Ken Parker, who for whatever reason found his home with those people. And if you're not like Dia Khan and unwilling to sit down with him, you will never know who is who. More importantly, you will never influence somebody for the better. Now, I mentioned that book by Gordon Allport, and I pulled it up so that you could take a look because I want to point it out. It's called The Nature of Prejudice, written by Gordon Allport. Classic study of the roots of discrimination with the new introduction, blah, 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 blah. This is a very valuable book. I think you should read it. If you really want to fight in the culture war, you should read this book so that you don't become what you hate. Because if you want to have an influence, if you want to make the place a better world, then you're going to have to do something different. I've told people, I'm like, look, I don't want my son growing up in a world where if he says something stupid, that all of a sudden a mob of people online who are from the safety of behind their keyboard are coming after him to get him fired. I don't want that happening. I don't want that to be the world that he lives in. Now, if he's a legitimate bad actor and he needs punished socially, ostracized, or whatever, that's an entirely different matter. If he becomes the ringleader of this, of some, terrible thing, then yeah, hold him accountable. If he does something to somebody, yes, hold him accountable. But if he just merely says something stupid, even if it's hateful, I want a world that's going to say, hey, man, that's not acceptable, but keep an open door in case he wants to repent and say, okay, I was wrong, and be honest and earnest about it. But that's not the world that we're creating by doing this. Well, the left has been doing this to us for 10 years. Okay. So in 10 years, you couldn't find anything else any other way? Because I sure did. I found a different way to approach people. How is it that you didn't? Because ultimately, a lot of people were sitting and waiting for their turn. That's what's going on. And ultimately, what that means is, for many on the right, you are no different than the left. You're no different in the sense that you'll go after just people that aren't harming you. You're no different in that you have the same attitude. And you're no different in the world that you're creating. You are exactly the same. But again, it's not about turning the other cheek. I mean, maybe for some people may not have I think that we need people of all stripes. We need people that are going to say, I'm turning the other cheek. I have no interest in any of it. We also need people that'll say, you know what? I'll punch back. I don't mind. But we need to make sure that when they punch, they're punching, if you will, metaphorically, the right person. Don't just go swinging wildly and take out whoever you can get a hold of. Because more than likely, you're just going to take out the low-level person who may or may not even really be all that low level and involved. They may be the effective equivalent of an innocent bystander. And I know that sounds weird to say, like, hey, if you say something nasty about the president, are you really an innocent bystander? If you have no power, you're not an innocent bystander, but effectively you're not much different. Because if you have the woman from Home Depot influences way fewer people, probably almost close to zero, compared to Donald Trump Jr. Which is worse? Saying, oh man, I wish the shooter had been successful, or saying, ha ha ha, you got attacked by a guy with a hammer and almost lost your life. Here's my Halloween costume making fun of it. Which is worse? They're both the same. But what is different? One man had power and the right sure as hell didn't go after him, but the other person had no power and the right went after her. Why? Because she's an easy, soft target that you don't have to worry about, because you're not really fighting a culture war. You're just going after the weak. That's all you're doing. Go after people with power and go after them regardless of what side they're on. If it's somebody on your side that's doing it, call them out and say, whoa, 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 stop. Not acceptable. If it's somebody on the other side, same thing. Hey, knock that off. It's not acceptable. And when there's an opportunity to show grace, well, then show it. Because grace is how you win. That is how people change. I want you to think back to the gay rights struggle. Did society get to a place where we're comfortable with gay people because gay people got us all fired? No, they didn't. You know what happened? There were families who said, my son is gay. That's terrible. Get out. But then there were families who said, my son's gay. And at first it was tough on them, right? They weren't happy with it. But then they were like, this is my son or my daughter. And I love them. And they had to come face to face with their ideas about homosexuality. And then there were other people who maybe had good friends that came out and they were like, this is my good friend. I know them. They're a good person. they're not all these things that I thought of when I thought of gay people. And then there are yet other people who came across somebody who was gay, was like, well, you're kind of funny, or you're actually a pretty nice person, or you're not after all the little kids, or you actually want a monogamous relationship. And then they said something that we used to make fun of. They would say, you're one of the good ones. But you know what? You're one of the good ones becomes, well, you're also one of the good ones. And you're also one of the good ones. Wow, there's quite a few good ones. That's what it becomes. It becomes there's a lot of good people. And so we come face to face with our ideas about who people are. And yeah, maybe this person over here is wishing death upon somebody and it's wrong and vile. But if we leave the door open to be able to say, you're other than that, you're actually a good person, then we leave the door open for that person to say, you know what, you're right. These things about me are good. This one is not. Let me discard it. Because if a KKK member, somebody who absolutely hates and it's wrapped in every fiber of their body, that's what they do. They go to rallies, they drop off leaflets, they hate people, they make justifications, they get online, they say hateful things, they say racist things, right? If somebody like that who is active, working hard to promote their hate, going well beyond the Home Depot lady, if somebody like that can be changed by simply leaving an opportunity available, well, then I don't think you can make an argument that somebody like Home Depot lady could also. Because as far as we know, he wasn't engaging in near the amount of hate as Ken Parker was. And yet he was able to reform. Roger Kelly was. Roger Kelly is the Grand Dragon wizard or whatever he is. He's the guy, he was the first guy that Daryl Davis sat down to talk with. He was the leader. There's CNN videos, the little 4x3 square videos of, from way back in the day. There's videos from CNN of Roger Kelly talking about how he's friends, with Daryl Davis. And then later, Roger Kelly renouncing his white supremacy. If those people can change, somebody like Home Depot lady can change. Somebody even like the lady from the yoga studio, Fat Linda, she can change as well. Because what she said and what those KKK members said are about the same. I'm sure those KKK members have said very similar things about blacks and Jews and gays and Catholics and whoever else that is that they hate, right? They've said similar things and they changed. So don't tell me that these people can't change, that you know who they are. Because if you haven't met them, no, you don't. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to the world. And when you're that dishonest with yourself, you're not a very valuable warrior in any fight because you don't know who you're attacking. And you don't know, or maybe don't care about the consequences. Blowback in the culture war is every bit as real as it is in real war. You harm people in a certain way, you fire up those around them. And it doesn't matter if you harm them by getting them fired or by blowing them up. Blowback is blowback. So that's my message to you. If you want to turn the other cheek, you go right ahead. I have no problem with that. I don't personally think that's the best way, but hey, it's okay. If you want to fight in the fight and take on some people, go after the agitators. Take them out. But make sure that you leave an opportunity for people to change. Because if you don't, then you don't deserve it from the other side either. It's that simple. All right, folks. That's my show today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great weekend. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.